now stand and join me in reciting the Pledge of
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Kindly remain standing. I would now like to invite Trooper Sebastian Nesky from Troop K Colchester and the Andover Resident Trooper's Office to come forward and sing the national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you, Trooper. Now, we'd like to proudly remember all those who have sacrificed their lives in service of ours. Please join us now in a moment of silence to honor these fallen heroes. Please be seated. As a proud partner with the United States of America's Vietnam War Commemoration, the Summers Department of Veterans Affairs, along with the town of Summers, truly feels privileged to honor Vietnam veterans and their families. Please join me in welcoming our distinguished guests joining us here today to honor our Vietnam veterans. Lieutenant Governor Susan Bysiewicz. Department of Veterans Affairs Commissioner Thomas J. Saadi. State Senator, 7th District, John Kissel. Summers' first Selectman, Timothy R. E. Keeney. Enfield Mayor, Robert Saadi. Military representatives to Senator Richard Blumenthal and Congressman Joe Courtney, Dustin Harrison, and Manny Meneses. Office of the Secretary of Defense, Command Sergeant Major Robert Jenks. And author and Vietnam combat veteran, Staff Sergeant Arthur Wiknik. Thank you for joining us for this national commemoration. Please now welcome Summers Department of Veterans Affairs Deputy Director Sherry Marquis, a retired Persian Gulf War-era Navy veteran. She will share a few historical facts and uniqueness of the commemoration lapel pin. Sherry.
Now, I don't want to get anybody excited or surprised, but I was informed that every single one of you out there in the audience is related to or is a veteran. Now, how ironic is that at a commemoration ceremony for Vietnam veterans, right? Thank you for joining us here today for this honorable ceremony. War touches the lives of almost every American at some time in their lives. Many would agree that Vietnam veterans were affected more so because of the unpopular nature of the war. It may surprise you to know that 42% of the 6.2 million veterans living today in America and abroad served during the Vietnam War period. What percent did I just say? 42%. So some of you are listening. All right. While more remains to be done, remarkable progress has taken place. Today, as commemorative partners, we have the distinct privilege to let our Vietnam veterans know how much we appreciate them. One of my favorite aspects of this ceremony is the honoring of our Vietnam veterans with the unique commemorative lapel pin, a lasting memento of the nation's gratitude. So when you see this, it's very special. It's up on the board. The lapel pin is beautifully struck and features an eagle's head representing courage, honor, and dedicated service. The stripes represent the nation's flag, and 6 stars represent the allies who served, sacrificed, and fought alongside one another, all encircling by a ring of blue, matching the canton of our national flag, and signifying vigilance, perseverance, and justice. The phrase, "A grateful nation thanks and honors you," is embossed on the reverse side along with the commemoration's name. Today, we also thank and honor 3 surviving spouses and 1 son, 2 surviving spouses and 1 son of Vietnam veterans from Summers. An honor certificate as well as a specially designed commemorative lapel pin with the embossed phrase, "A grateful nation honors the service and sacrifice of your family," will be presented to them. A fitting and famous quote by our nation's first president, George Washington, conveys the significance of appreciating and honoring our warfighters. The willingness with which our young people are likely to serve in any war, no matter how justified, shall be directly proportional to how they perceive the veterans of earlier wars were treated by their nation. Join the nation and thank a Vietnam veteran. David?
It's my great pleasure for me to introduce our host speaker today, the Town of Summers' first Selectman, the Honorable Timothy R.E. Keeney, a United States Navy SEAL and Vietnam veteran. He has a long history here in the Town of Summers and as a public servant. He is a retired probate judge and attorney and is a key member of several town organizations and committees. Tim is going to talk a bit about his experience in the military during the Vietnam War and then share some history of the United States of America's Vietnam War commemoration. Please welcome Tim Keeney.
Thank you, David, for that introduction. It's my great privilege to host today's event on behalf of the Town of Summers. I'm sort of impressed with the turnout. I know it wasn't easy for some of you folks to get here. congratulations for showing up. This is great. Like to, we are all veterans or families of veterans whose service and sacrifice are being recognized today. First, I want to thank a few people. As the host, I get to do that. I'd like to thank Veterans Affairs Director David McCaffrey and Deputy Director Sheridan Marquis, who organized today's event. Just last Thursday, on behalf of the Board of Selectmen in the town of Summers, I presented them with the Robert Perkowski Public Service Award, which is an award we give out annually for outstanding public service, for their tireless effort and selfless efforts in serving the veterans of our community and beyond. Their job is to inform and educate veterans of the resources and services for which they have earned and assist in the recipient of the same. Dave and Sherry raise public service to the highest level. I encourage you, if you've not already, to seek their assistance. You will not be disappointed. Please join me in thanking them for crafting and executing today's events. Truly a tremendous accomplishment. I also want to recognize our Lieutenant Governor Bysiewicz and other officials already mentioned by David. A particular note is State Commissioner Tom Saadi, a relentless leader and standard bearer for veterans and their families throughout Connecticut. This past Friday, Commissioner Saadi hosted the annual Veterans Affairs stand-down in 5 separate communities throughout the state. That would be Rocky Hill, Bristol, Bridgeport, Danbury, and Norwich. That's a lot of travel in one day. To directly connect these veterans with life-changing assistance for which they are eligible and for which they have earned. Such things as legal assistance, employment programs, medical screening, educational programs, and vaccinations. Thank you, Commissioner Saadi, for your outstanding leadership. I tell you, I've worked with several state veterans commissioners over the last 30 years, starting with Hank Harper, who was Governor Weiker's commissioner when I was the DEP commissioner back in 1991. Commissioner Saadi ranks right at the top of all of those individuals. Thank you, Commissioner Saadi. I mentioned I was privileged to be here today. My Vietnam experience included commanding a SEAL platoon deployed to Vietnam and other countries for 8 months, from 1971 to 1972. Like many of you, I was well trained and worked with a team of professionals, several of whom had prior Vietnam experience. Today's ceremony is focused on thanking local veterans and their families for service to our country during the Vietnam era, some 20 years, 1955 to 1975. I ask you as veterans to reflect on what we all learned from our military experience. Things like the benefits of getting out of your comfort zone and exposure to unimagined challenges. You were all tested to understand the maximum of your full potential. From your experience, you developed self-confidence, the importance of teamwork, resilience, certainly camaraderie with your teammates, an attitude of never quitting, the importance of humility, and having a sense of humor. In fact, I recall telling my son, Tim Jr., who went through SEAL training 30 years after I did, I said, Timmy, if you can understand or identify with a warped sense of humor of the instructors putting you through training, you're 50% there already. Sense of humor is very important. I ask you to reflect on Mark Twain's definition of courage. Courage is the mastery of fear. And you certainly have all been there. Now I want to get back to the history of today's event. Authorized by Congress and established under the Secretary of Defense and launched by the President of the United States in 2012, this commemoration's primary purpose is to thank and honor Vietnam veterans and their families for their service and sacrifice. Today we join thousands of communities throughout our nation in doing just that. In 2017, our Commander-in-Chief also issued a presidential proclamation which stated, and I quote, "To ensure the sacrifices of the 9 million heroes who served during this difficult chapter of our country's history are remembered for generations to come." I signed into law the Vietnam Veterans Recognition Act of 2017, designating March 29th each year as our National Vietnam War Veterans Day. The President's proclamation lists the number of veterans who served during that period as 9 million. This number reflects the fact that our national commemoration honors everyone who served on active duty in the armed forces from November 1, 1955 to May 15, 1975. No distinction is being made between the veterans who served in country, in theater, or were stationed elsewhere during the Vietnam period. The President's proclamation honors all those who were called to serve as none could self-determine where they were stationed, and all were seen in the same way by a country that could not separate the war from the warrior. In his words, each person served during this period earned and rightly deserves our profound thanks.
Thank you, Lieutenant. It is now my pleasure to introduce Lieutenant Governor Susan Bysiewicz. She continues to show her support for our military veterans by traveling around the state to give those who served recognition they deserved but never received. Please welcome Lieutenant Governor Bysiewicz.
Thank you so much, and it's an honor to be with our veterans and family members of veterans on this beautiful fall day. When I was Secretary of the State in 2008, I had this inspiration to honor World War II veterans across the state, and I traveled to 140 towns and recognized more than 15,000 of our greatest generation. And it was a good thing we did that because then, in 2008, we were losing 1,500 World War II veterans a day. And sadly, there are very few left, but my Aunt Mary is 101, a World War II Coast Guard veteran who is still going. And along the way, I had the opportunity to meet people who also served in Korea. They served in both wars, in World War II and Korea, and remarkably some in Vietnam as well, if you can imagine that. So when I took office as Lieutenant Governor, the Commissioner of Veterans Affairs and I decided it was time to recognize and say thank you, and most importantly, welcome home to our Vietnam veterans who sadly did not receive the parades, the accolades, the celebrations that the veterans of World War II received. And in fact, it wasn't just that you were not celebrated when you returned home, because Vietnam was such a complicated war and such an unpopular war. Some of you may have faced all kinds of unpleasant receptions when you returned home. So It has been an incredible privilege to visit more than 50 towns across the state. Sadly, the pandemic put a little bit of a hiatus on our ceremonies, but it's been incredible to visit each town and to meet some very brave and courageous people, including nurses who were in the helicopters picking up wounded soldiers in Vietnam, people who fought in combat, and people who served all across the globe helping. When we went to Enfield and visited with Mayor Saadi, I was reminded what a patriotic part of the state this is, because there were so many veterans of Vietnam in Enfield. We had to have 2 ceremonies, both of which filled up the high school auditorium at Enfield High School. So I feel so privileged today to join you in Summers to say thank you and welcome home. We should remember the 58,000 people who did not return home and whose names are on that beautiful memorial in Washington, D.C. And we also remember today the 612 people from Connecticut that did not come home. We know that we enjoy such precious freedoms in this country. The freedom to determine our leaders by voting, the freedom to speak and worship as we choose. And these freedoms are very unusual in other parts of the globe. And we enjoy them because you put your lives on the line for us. And so today, it is just such a pleasure on behalf of Governor Lamont and I to say thank you for your service. For those who served overseas, you had to endure the rain, the monsoon rains, the very difficult combat, PTSD, exposure to toxic chemicals. What you went through is unimaginable, and we are so impressed with your resilience and the fact that you continue to serve, whether it's in veterans organizations, whether it's through volunteering in civic and community groups, or even being in elective office. We are so very proud of all of you. Welcome home. God bless you, your families, our beautiful state, and our great country. Thank you so much.
Thank you for such a thoughtful tribute to our veterans and for your continual work in recognizing their service. Our next guest speaker traveled from his home state of New York to honor our veterans today. We are very pleased to welcome Command Sergeant Major Robert D. Jenks, Jr. from the Vietnam War Commemoration Office of the Secretary of Defense. The Command Sergeant Major entered the United States Army on 26 June 1981. He served in multiple light and airborne infantry units on active duty at home and overseas, then entering the Army National Guard in 1987. He is a highly decorated military leader with a passion for his country and its patriots. Please put your hands together for Command Sergeant Major Robert Jenks.
Make a couple of adjustments up here, but thank you very much so much for having me here today. On behalf of the Secretary of Defense, we are humbled to be here to honor these Vietnam veterans. I'd also like to thank all the partnered agencies that help us recognize these Vietnam veterans across the nation. We would not be able to get the job done without you. This is a privilege for me to be part of this special event. To all our many veterans, thank you is an incredible understatement. There are no words to describe what your service and sacrifice means.
so I'll leave it at that. To the family and friends standing by your side, and in the memory of loved ones lost, your strength carries this country. It has not gone unnoticed, and it will never be forgotten. There were more than 58,000 knocks at the door during the Vietnam conflict. There are still 1,558 still listed as missing in action. They were killed in combat or died in captivity, and their bodies were never recovered to provide final closure for the families and loved ones. In Vietnam, there were 263 Medals of Honor, and in fact, out of the 65 living Congressional Medal of Honor recipients, 44 are Vietnam veterans. For the veterans here today, you know what it's like to put your life on the line, and by the grace of God, you are still here today. Many of you have had battle buddies who paid the ultimate sacrifice. When asked, our Vietnam veterans answered the nation's call, just like veterans of past wars and present wars. Our country has made a special effort to recognize the service and sacrifice associated with conflicts at their 50th anniversary, and Vietnam has now come of age. It is time for us as a nation to step up and accomplish something that should have been done years ago. So that's why I'm here today, to represent the Secretary of Defense supporting these events across America, to assist the grateful nation in thanking and honoring our Vietnam veterans and their families, especially families who lost loved ones in that war. I am privileged to serve the United States of America Vietnam War Commemoration, our national effort to thank the more than 6.2 million still living Vietnam veterans and the 9 million family members of all who served on active duty between 1 November 1955 and 15 May 1975. Very important date, okay? Those dates are very important. The Vietnam veterans here today, you did not receive the parades and thanks you deserve. The way you were treated when you came home was a national shame, a disgrace that should never have happened. But that's why we are here, to resolve that it will never happen again. I am honored and proud on this day to say thank you and welcome home. To date, we have recognized more than 3.1 million Vietnam veterans through the efforts of our more than 12,000 partners at more than 22,000 events across this nation. We still have more than 3.1 million Vietnam veterans to thank and honor, and we need your help. Help us reach your friends and relatives, your brothers and sisters. Help us reach out to those hard-to-reach veterans. Help us reach our Vietnam veterans in soldiers' homes, nursing homes, assisted living facilities, or some other form of palliative care facility. Help us with the healing that happens when we reach a veteran who would just rather leave Vietnam in the rearview mirror than to receive our nation's thanks and gratitude. We have a keen sense of urgency, especially since the VA estimates that we are losing more than 557 Vietnam veterans each day, which is a staggering number, and this number will only grow. There was a scene from Saving Private Ryan where an aged Matt Damon turns to his wife and says, "Tell me I've lived a good life. Tell me that I am a good man, that I have earned it." I believe that's what you do when we extend our nation's thanks and gratitude. We tell our veterans they earned it. Finally, history hurts, but it also teaches. And one of the most important lessons of the Vietnam War is that we must always honor those who have lived through great, terrible times in the defense of freedom, because every generation of Americans that go to war for this nation is defined the same way, by the virtues of selfless service, sacrifice, and devotion to duty. For all our Vietnam veterans here today, you need to know your service years ago was both important to the nation and meaningful to us. You made a difference in our lives and the lives of our children. I believe that your final legacy will be the continuation of an unbroken generational change of service to the nation. When asked to serve, you did your part, and each of you deserve the gratitude of a grateful nation. In closing, it is my distinct privilege to be able to carry on that tradition, especially honor our Vietnam veterans and their families. On a special note, all the deployments that I've been on in the last 21 years of this past conflict that we've had, our landings and our returns back to the United States have been pretty soft. And that's because of these gentlemen and ladies sitting right here, these Vietnam veterans. Give them a round of applause. They made sure my homecoming was a special homecoming. And they did not receive that, but they made sure I received that, and all of our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, and Coast Guardsmen that came home from this conflict had a welcoming home from these veterans right here. So may God bless our veterans, may God bless and protect our servicemen and women and their families, and may God bless America. Thank you.
Thank you, Command Sergeant Major Jenks. Turning to our next speaker, please join me in welcoming author and Army combat veteran, Staff Sergeant Arthur Wiknik Jr. Art is such an example of optimism and a positive can-do attitude. He uses his writing to make lemonade from lemons. Kindly welcome Arthur Wiknik.
Thanks, everyone. I was here a couple of weeks ago, so the story I'm going to tell you you've probably heard before. It's called the Mickey Mouse Watch. Now, you're probably wondering, what does a Mickey Mouse watch have to do with my Vietnam service? Well, I'm going to tell you. In 1968, I was drafted. I was working at Pratt & Whitney, had a great job. I bought a brand new Camaro. I had a girlfriend that I was crazy about, but all that was going to end, or at least be put on hold. So I go into the Army, and my girlfriend wrote to me like every day, almost every day. It was great. And that's what kept me going. So eventually I end up in Vietnam. And when I'm over there, the letters just kept coming. They're very passionate, talking about getting married, having a family, we'll have kids, we're just gonna have a great life together. However, 6 months into that, my tour, the letters stopped. So for about 3 or 4 weeks, I got nothing. And then I knew there was nothing wrong with the mail because I kept getting mail from my parents and my other friends. Finally, a letter appears, and I'm afraid to open it. It's got to be a Dear John. But it wasn't. It was probably worse. What it was she wrote again with all the passion was gone. It sounded like a homework assignment. So I kind of knew that, being home alone, she was 18 years old, I was 20 years old. She had more to do than sit around and wait for me every day. So she apparently found someone, and she did. But she kept writing. Not as much, maybe once a week. No more passion, no more love. Just, how's it going? It snowed here today, blah, blah, blah. I didn't care. That didn't help. So at that time, it was probably the lowest point in my tour in Vietnam. I was miserable. The one person that kept me alive, that kept me going, I had lost her. So I was on the verge of giving up. So late one night, one of my platoon members wakes me up. Hey, Sergeant Wiknik, it's time for your guard. Here, take my watch. So, and we all had luminous watches, so you can see in the dark, and you knew when to wake up the next guy. But what he handed me was a Mickey Mouse pocket watch, probably this big, I've seen that big, that glowed in the dark. So I'm looking at that watch. I see Mickey Mouse's red pants, his yellow shoes, his white hands going around. And I'm thinking, wow, this is really cool. Everything we see out here is either green from the vegetation or muddy brown. You don't see colors in Vietnam. We're not out in the jungle. So I'm looking at that watch. Hell, for all I know, I just kept staring at it. For all I know, the enemy could have been jumping around in front of me. I didn't pay much attention to that. But that watch intrigued me. I'm looking at it, and I remember when I was a kid, every day after school, I'd come home and I'd watch the Mickey Mouse Club. And it kind of put me in another world for a little while when it was on TV. And then I started thinking about the neighborhood that I grew up in. We had a little skating pond, and every winter, all the kids in the neighborhood would clean off the pond and we'd ice skate. In the summertime, there was hay fields, and we'd play softball. In fact, I even thought about my father yelling at me, and I missed that. So then suddenly something magical happened, as if Mickey Mouse was looking at me and talking to me and saying, you know what, you're going to make it, things are going to be okay. You're going to survive. And believe it or not, I believe that stupid watch. So then something happened that I just felt great. I couldn't believe it, that little watch made me actually feel good. So when I came home, one of the first things I did was go out and buy a Mickey Mouse watch. And I've worn one ever since. And the reason I wear that watch is because I never want to forget that no matter how low life is, no matter how bad things are going for you, the next day is going to be better. Thank you.
Thank you, Art. That was very memorable. Continuing our thanks and gratitude, we are much honored to have here with us today our closing keynote speaker, Commissioner Thomas J. Saadi, Connecticut Department of Veterans Affairs. Commissioner Saadi is a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army Reserve and received his commission as a judge advocate in 2005. Completed officer basic training in 2006, officer advanced training in 2014, and command and general staff college in 2016. He is our leadership for the Summers Department of Veterans Affairs and has been a staunch supporter of our office and the veterans in our area and throughout the state. Thank you for taking part in the ceremony with us today, Commissioner Saadi. Please welcome Commissioner Thomas Saadi.
Today for the introduction of your service to our nation and continued service to your brother and sister veterans. First Selectman Keeney, Lieutenant Governor Bysiewicz, Senator Kissel, Mayor Saadi, Command Sergeant Major Jenks, and Staff Sergeant Wiknik, guests, and most importantly, veterans. It's an honor for me to be able to join with you this morning to recognize the service of our Vietnam War and Vietnam War era veterans. It's humbling for me to serve as Commissioner of the Connecticut Department of Veterans Affairs because I lead the agency with a mission of serving those who serve. And that is so important because it's only because of those who have served and those who continue to serve in our armed forces that all of us and all Americans have the privilege of living in this great free and democratic nation. You, the veterans who are here today, are part of a rich military history that goes back to the opening days of the American Revolutionary War, when Massachusetts militiamen stood up and faced down heavily armed and well-trained British regulars at Lexington and Concord and drove them back to their billets in Boston. It's a history of fighting for freedom, the freedom of those 13 colonies, and then the struggle to keep them free from colonial reconquest, the fight to free and enslave people in bondage in this nation and to keep this union whole. Then in 2 world wars to free Africa, Europe, Asia, and the Pacific from tyranny and oppression. In Korea and in Vietnam, aiding the desperate people in the struggle against communist aggression. Since Vietnam, Americans have deployed under arms to dozens of troubled spots in combat, security, stability, and humanitarian operations. Courageous Americans of every generation have stepped forward to fight for freedom when called upon and did their duty, as you did, with honor. And for nearly 2.5 centuries, it is that flag, and no other flag, north or south, that stands for this nation. Stars and stripes are not just colors on a piece of cloth. They represent the essence of the freedom and democracy which you and your comrades serve to protect, whether in country or overseas. Your service, that of your comrades, some of them making that ultimate sacrifice, allow us to all live in this country. Something we must ensure this nation never forgets. I know you have not forgotten because you lived it. Your family members know as well because they live with you and love you. But unfortunately, at times, as others had said, this nation has at times failed to take up that mantle of supporting our veterans and their family members. You, the Vietnam veterans, had to endure, as others have said, those unjust insults and attacks by protesters and politicians, and the apathy of the American public to what you were going through. what they all forgot, and what we must always remind others, and in Vietnam, particularly the case. It was not the veteran who started the war. It was not the Vietnam veteran who had a contribution in deciding how that war was conducted. And it certainly wasn't the veteran who sat at the table to decide how that war should be ended. But it was you, the veteran, your comrades, who served, fought, and who sacrificed, no matter your personal political feelings. Because you and your comrades answer to that higher call, that of duty, honor, and country. One of those Vietnam veterans, one of your comrades, is a cousin of mine. His name is Anthony. He gave me a patch when I was a kid, probably about 7 or 8 years old. I thought it was really cool to have this army patch. But I had no concept of what him wearing that patch meant, what he, what many of you went through in Vietnam, and what you had to endure when you came home. This is the patch he gave me. 1st Air Mobile Division, or 1st Air Cav. My cousin Anthony was a sky trooper in the 7th Regiment, Gary Owen Regiment. Other people know it as Custer's Regiment. A little bit foreboding when he first reported for his assignment, but he struggled through and he did come home. I later learned that after surviving a protracted, unconventional, and unpopular war, my cousin, the Vietnam veterans in this room, and the Vietnam War era veterans, because when you wore the uniform, even if you weren't in country, you were also attacked as well at times. You didn't come home to those parades and thank yous. And while so many of you and my cousin led outwardly normal lives, hosting family parties, working your jobs, raising families, volunteering in your communities, it was only after I joined the military that he opened up to me and started to share his stories. Talk about the PTSD, the triggers, the nightmares, the chronic diseases that he and many of you carry in your bodies. This is the case for so many of you who return home with those visible and invisible wounds of war, who had to wait years, if not decades, and still waiting at times for recognition and treatment for the full scope of your service. I keep this patch in my office as a reminder of my obligation, not just to you, our Vietnam and Vietnam War era veterans, but to all veterans, that no matter what we feel about our nation's response to a geopolitical problem, no matter what we feel about a war, whether we believe it's right or wrong, we must put aside those personal feelings as a nation and always come together to support our veterans, our service members, and their families. To all who served, I thank you for your service. I thank your family members, friends, and loved ones who are here today because they served with you and continue to do so. I have special thanks to Sherry Marquis and Dave McCaffrey for all that they do and the great partnership with my agency, the Department of Veterans Affairs. I want to thank Senator Kissel and his colleagues for their support, and Senator for supporting legislation personally and professionally that advances the cause of our veterans. To our Vietnam veterans and Vietnam War veterans, thank you for your service. Whether you served in country or somewhere around the globe, you served to protect this nation and millions around the globe. Thank you for not losing faith with this nation, for standing up, as the Command Sergeant Major said, so that subsequent generations of veterans would get the recognition and support that they deserve, just as you should have gotten when you came home. So I thank you for your service, welcome you home, thank you for all you continue to do. May God bless you, the United States of America, and our armed forces. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. We are always grateful for your support here in Summers. Thank you. We will now commence with the recognizing of our honorees. Veterans, as your name is read, please stand and move to the center of the auditorium to receive your lapel pin, presidential proclamation, honor certificates, and a photo. And then you can return to your seat after the photo. Families, you are absolutely encouraged to take pictures. Normally, we would ask everyone to hold their applause until all lapel pins have been presented, but we've been holding our applause for 50 years. So we encourage you to respectfully Maintain your applause throughout each veteran's and surviving spouse's presentation. Let these men and women know how much you appreciate your sacrifice and service. We will now move to the presentation area. Mrs. Marquis will now read the veteran and surviving spouses and son's name as they receive their honorary documents and are pinned or handed their lapel pin.
Thank you so much.
Myron Royal Avery, United States Air Force, Sapper. David Joseph Black, United States Air Force, Summers. Gary Anthony Cara, United States Army, Summers. John Ernest Charbonneau, United States Army, Summers. Ronald Joseph Dupre, United States Army, Summers. Edward John Evans Jr., United States Air Force, Enfield. John Francis Gallagher, United States Army, Summers. Emilio Anthony Hernandez Jr., United States Marine Corps, Summers. Donald Ores Carbonic, United States Army, Enfield. Lawrence Robert LeBar, United States Navy, Enfield. Clarence Joseph, I like pronouncing those French names, La Riviere, United States Air Force, Ellington. John Francis Manning, United States Navy, Enfield. Is George Mantek here? I see you over there, Bruce. Bruce Kent McIntyre, United States Army, Summers. George, you ready? George H. McLean III, United States Navy, Stafford. Edwin Douglas Miller, United States Army, Summers. Francis thank you. United States Navy, Ellington.
Okay. They didn't draw any blood.
Muldoon. Is Thomas Muldoon here? John? Jonathan Brian Norman, United States Army, Summers. Bill, I'm gonna call, because it was alphabetical, so we'll call you when we get to your name alphabetically, okay? We didn't forget about you. David Gerald Norrie, United States Army, Summers. Rudy, you're up. Rhubarb Lorenzo Owen, United States Army, James Francis Radowitz, United States Coast Guard, Summers. Paul Giovanni Rosses, United States Navy, Summers. David Merle Reed, United States Army, Summers. William Henry Root, United States Navy, Coventry. Joseph Ronald Roy, United States Coast Guard, Stafford. Frederick James Shaw, Jr., United States Army, Summers. George Martin Shaw, United States Marine Corps, Ellington. Peter Bowling Smith, United States Coast Guard, Stafford. So I'm going to tell you right now that I'm going to be partial to this next person because she is a shipmate and the only woman veteran here today. Please welcome Ellen Ann Sullivan, United States Navy. Roger William Sullivan, United States Navy, Windsor Locks. And yes, Ellen and Roger are married. I think for over 60 years. Ellen, do you want to go go up and get a picture with your husband at the same time?
Yes.
The crowd pressure.
That makes the picture better,
Good to see you, buddy.
William Asher Taylor, United States Army, Enfield.
My wife said, don't stab me.
Paul Roger Thibodeau, United States Air Force, Summer. Okay, Colonel, I'm hoping I pronounced your name right. I always get Robert August Tyson, United States Army, Summer. Susan. And now we have Robert Frederick Tremblay, United States Navy, Summer. First President. Bob, the veteran sitting next to you?
Well, he is a veteran, but he wasn't very.
Oh, okay, just want to make sure we didn't miss you. Right. And now we have Kenneth Alton Usher, United States Army, East Windsor. Our next veteran may not need an introduction, but I'll do it anyway. So we have here, up next is Arthur Burton Wiknik Jr., United States Army. United States Air Force, Summers. This next group of folks, we have 3 here today that were honored with that special group. They're family members who lost either their husband, who's a veteran, or their father. And I can tell you, I know I get pretty cranky sometimes. We can get pretty difficult to deal with, and so our family, our members are important to us, and they love us, and these folks lost someone that they love dearly, and so I know you all have compassion for them. I'd like to bring to the forefront here Mrs. Patricia Carpe. Her husband, Joseph Paul Carpe, United States Army, Summers. Please embrace Valerie Masita, the surviving spouse of Anthony P. Masita Jr., United States Army, Summers. Next, we have Robert Sosha, a devoted son and a Navy brat. His father served as a captain in the United States Army, or in the United States Navy. Albert Robert Sosha Jr., United States Navy, Summers. That concludes our honorees today, and I'll turn it over to David for the closing remarks, and then we can eat some cake and mingle.
Ladies and gentlemen, your heroes. Thank you for attending today. Before we leave today, please rise if you can when your military service song is played. We're going to play that in a moment. Once the Armed Forces medley is finished, our ceremony concludes. As you mingle and enjoy the company and refreshments, I encourage everyone here to please take a moment before you depart to reach out and shake the hand of one of our Vietnam veterans or family members. They all deserve our appreciation and respect. One moment, we'll get the medley on.
United States Air Force.
United States Navy. United States Marine Corps. United States Army. So that concludes our ceremony today. We greatly appreciate all of those that attended today. I think it was a great success, and we're happy to honor all the Vietnam veterans here today. So thank you so much. Please, we have refreshments in the back. We have a cake and lots of goodies back here, coffee, tea, and please mingle and socialize and talk to your fellow veterans and their families. Thank you so much again.